All right, welcome to another installment of
Got
the
it.
Life Happens podcast. I'm your host Ryan Dotson. With me, as always, is Shawnee Mack. Shawnee, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. As you can see by Sean's shirt, it is summer hours, summer initiatives. We missed you last week, but we are back, and we are back with a big one. Today, we are talking about Biden's budget proposal in the tune of, or to the tune of, $6 trillion. That's with a T, trillion dollars. Um, right off the bat, just that number alone, Sean, what do you think? I know we talked about 4 trillion, the stimulus package, in addition to whatever we were doing before the show even started. 6 trillion seems like money that we don't have.
Well, yeah, it is for starters, but we should probably start off the show with that. This is $6 trillion that we don't have. We're going to go into debt to get this money to spend. So just like let's make sure we're all clear about that. It is definitely money we don't have. We are still, charging our credit card, and no one's called for the bill yet, so it's okay.
Yeah, we
But
have a
it,
huge black Amex. It's an American black Amex.
yeah, it's a big one. But it's more increases in spending. It's constant. It's every year. We're going to get into it today, but it's frustrating because it's way too common for them to use the term $1 trillion now. That used to be like almost like a taboo number. Now it's like trillions everywhere, and that change happened very quickly.
Yeah, I remember when we were in high school, the big thing was, we hit, I think it was either 9 or 10 trillion dollars in debt, as like a deficit, as like a deficit for
Hmm.
the country. It was $9 trillion, and that number was insane. But now you're hearing 4 trillion, you're hearing 6 trillion. I mean, that's it. You're right. It's way too common. Billion used to be high. Now it's trillion, and we're going up, up, and up. And you know, laws of physics, what goes up must come down, right?
Yeah, eventually, and that's figuring out when is if you figure out when, you make all the money in the world. But that's
Exactly.
that's the real kicker because, like you said, when the federal deficit, the U.S. budget clock they have, you can track it on the website, was 9 trillion. Everyone was scared it was going to hit 10 double digits. Everyone was freaking out, thought it was way too much. They
With good reason.
thought the same thing at which for good reason, but they thought the same thing at 15 trillion, same thing at 20 trillion. Now we're at 27 trillion, something like that,
Jesus,
and,
I didn't even
and
know it was that
it
high.
yeah, it is continually unsustainable, but at what point does it become like unsustainable to the point where it can break the system, right?
Hmm.
And I think people think the increase in spending is now pushing us towards that point faster than we would have otherwise gone. And that's what people are getting concerned about.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
that, when you say break something, we mean like destroy the value of the dollar, for example. Like when we just say hypothetically the idea of like break things, we're saying like they could run away with overdoing their spending and then destroy the value of the dollar, and that tends to hurt the U.S. economy or just standing in the world. So that's kind of what that means. We say like might break something. You understand how that could be a bit vague.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I go back to, just real quick, I go back to, like, comparison wise, is like the 2008 housing crisis, right? The 2008 housing crisis, people didn't pay their mortgages. Like, yeah, they get kicked out of their homes. Why is my retirement plan, now worth absolutely zero, which happened to tens, not hundreds, but tens of millions of Americans, like, lost everything because, the housing market, everything has a ripple effect. Everything is so intertwined and so meshed together into this one big thing that if one cog breaks in the system, specifically this, the US dollar, like you said, it can have catastrophic effects. Now, we've seen the likes of that in 2008 and things like that. We've since recovered, when in reality, we're just making it bigger and bigger. But going back to the budget, going
Yeah.
back to Biden's proposal, $6 trillion now. Before coming out with the proposal, he had two initiatives, right? The American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan, which at this point he might as well call the America Freedom America plan. Like, those
Yeah,
trigger
they love to
words
do
and
that.
all the analysis of all these people saying, how do you name it, wasn't in what
Look
was
at
it
the
in House of
Freedom
Cards?
Act, for
Yeah,
example.
the Freedom Act. The House of Cards was America's Jobs Plan. I think it was literally what it is, and now it's actually in reality. So essentially, the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan, an initial $4 trillion initiative, has now become a $6 trillion budget, right? So what does that entail? That entails a focus on modernizing infrastructure, which we have talked on the show about. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. I personally think it's one of the most immediate things that are impacting America as a whole. in addition to education, right? Which for me personally, I support. I think education is important. I think that the cost of education is astronomical. It's through the roof. I think it's a Ponzi scheme, or a Ponzi scheme. How the cost of education has increased over time.
Yeah,
It's
staggering.
But we could do a whole episode on that. So where the two things is, infrastructure, modern infrastructure, and then education. So the education idea is free community college, which is 2 years, and then 2 years of basically childcare, pre-kindergarten, right? Preschool education. So in addition to that, there's also the term, and this is what kind of chaps my ass, is the strengthening of the social safety net. Now, to me, that says pushing a car that broke down, caught flames, and exploded, and we're just pushing a frame down the highway at this point via the Social Security system.
Yeah, everyone knows the system's like insolvent, right? It's public knowledge that the Social Security system is completely insolvent. They know it's going to run out of money, and by most calculations, 2035 now, unless there's drastic overhaul. So like for them to just, it's all just like virtue signaling, right? It's just like they're going to pick the things that are popular and they're going to put an increased focus on those things. Sure, they'll do a little bit more for it, but it's an overhaul of the system. That's what's needed. It's not a band-aid here and there, but it gives them an excuse to run with what's very popular in the Democratic community right now, which is all of these socialist programs and agendas.
Exactly.
More free stuff because they don't fear this spending that we see an issue with. So that's kind of what it comes down to is I see $6 trillion in spending as probably a bit too much. And they actually would argue we can get away with more. And I guess that's just where the disagreement is at the most basic level.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they used all of the liberal trigger words, right? And I say trigger in a positive way, right? So you have
Yes.
Social Security, the education, public health, clean energy, green, love green, all of those things that keep the voters that voted Democratic being supportive, and then also basically just saying, this is gonna be fine, it's gonna be all right. They also laid out a plan to raise revenue by $3.7 trillion. Just said they were going to do it via raising in corporate taxes, which we have said numerous times on this show. Nobody pays corporate taxes. Companies don't pay them. So
they need to figure out taxes. Companies need to pay their taxes. Like they need to redo the tax code. Like again, but the proposals of how they're going to get the money are crazy. Like again, I think we talked about it last time, taxing unrealized capital gains. Like if your stock goes up in value and you don't sell the stock, you still have to pay taxes on it.
That's insane to me because that is an investment. Like, I mean, we all have 401ks. We all have individual broker accounts. Like, well, some of us do. I mean, it was a big thing in 2020 with the pandemic. A lot of people, your average Joe, we've talked about it at length. Now they're saying, well, now that the average and middle class Americans have them, let's tax those too.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And they like to pretend as though it's going after billionaires because, for example, Elon Musk is always easy to point at. His wealth during the pandemic went up like something insane, like $60 billion last year. All of that was because of Tesla share price appreciation. He only makes like $1 million a year. So he didn't sell any shares. Let's pretend hypothetically he didn't sell any shares. He never made any money. His net worth just went up. So he doesn't have the money to pay the capital gains unless he sells shares, which would then drive the stock price down, which would then hurt other investors. So like, think about it when it comes to your own portfolio as well. Like I have long-term investments that I've held for a while. If they want to tax unrealized capital gains, like that's unfair. I haven't recognized the gain yet.
And obviously,
how can you tax it?
An annual basis, right? So
that's like your house going up in value.
Exactly. January 1, it's X. December 31st, it's Y. You're getting taxed on the difference. All that could go away in 2022.
So it's just pretty crazy. These are their proposals for, how they're going to get this spending. So that's why it's important. You need to not just understand why the spending is bad, but also how are they going to go about getting this money, the means to for all these programs, all of this spending. Because that's the concern. It's always a new program. It's always a new this, a new that.
Right.
And then they never give it back. And that's the
No,
issue. You got more
no,
stats?
they definitely don't. No, you're good. I want you to go in.
No, well, that's my main point here is, the government brings in a lot of money in tax receipts. The government makes, quote unquote, over $3 trillion a year in tax receipts. We should be able to run our country on $3 trillion a year, I would argue. And I got pulled up a chart over here. We did as far back as like the early 2000s. We were only spending, only quote unquote $3 trillion a year.
Right.
So in 2010, we could get by on $3 trillion a year. I don't think the world has gone that crazy and that far off the rails where we need to spend double what we were spending on 2010 to run this country.
Since the inception of the country, like that's.
I don't think it should. I don't know. Doesn't that seem astronomical to you as a person, like to the average listener?
It absolutely does. And you just made a great point. We don't actually know, right? That's what this show is about, is acknowledging things, seeing them, and questioning them, not taking them for face value, right? Like the bill proposal is $6 trillion. First question is why? Second question is how? And third question is it necessary, right? That's how we approach every single topic. And this one is no different. It's funny because you did ask if I had a stat. I got one I can throw at you. The national debt could reach record highs and equal 117% of economic output by 2031. Our quote, Jesus, this is crazy. I haven't looked at this in like a week. Over time, the savings from the reforms will outpace the cost of investments. They're just saying this. They're saying that this money by 2031 is going to be good. So now, in plain English, the goalposts, like we always say, have been pushed out. We're going to be fine. It's all going to settle down. The dust's all going to settle and we're going to be good. But if one thing goes wrong between now and that expected resolution, you're shit out of luck as a nation.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And it's becoming a problem because if you get to the how a little bit more, that's where it becomes interesting. The government pretty much raises money by issuing bonds. Again, various other means. We're not going to get into how to run the country, but they sell bonds, right? Everyone remembers like stories of World War II. All the little families went out and they bought bonds, and that's how the government paid for the war, buy war bonds. That's what they do. They issue bonds, people buy them, and that gives the government money for an IOU at a later date. Back in the day, we used to support ourselves, through our own bonds. We'd sell some internationally, but the government, there's no longer a buyer for U.S. bonds for all of our bonds. So the world over, there's not enough people to buy the debt we issue as a country every year, which in the normal world would tell you there's too much debt if the entire rest of the world can't support it. But we have the Federal Reserve, they print money, they take on the debt, and that's how the government is now financing our debt. So some people would argue that's a problem. The Democrats would argue it's not. I think eventually it's going to be an issue. I don't think any like countries that have monetized their national currency, their own debt, and not had inflation and GDP problems down the road. So we'll see.
The overall just ignorance / actually ignoring the concept and the math of inflation is bananas. Everyone is just ignoring that inflation is, one, happening, two, going to be a real problem a lot sooner than these resolutions and capital restructuring fixes are going to take place. Like we're going to run into the wall a lot sooner than I feel like a lot of people anticipate, because it's bad news with no answer.
And it hits the average American first as well. That's the thing, is like price raises are going to happen. Like if you follow some social, you saw it on Twitter. There's a story about Chipotle raising the cost of their menu prices because of labor shortages and food shortages. Well, guess what? The Federal Reserve is saying those shortages are temporary. So they'll go away and that will cure inflation and things will be okay. My question to you is, do you think Chipotle is going to lower their prices when those inflationary pressures go away? Or did your meal at Chipotle just get forever more expensive?
It got forever more expensive.
That's the average American getting hit first.
And it's funny because while that's happening on all the social platforms and things like that, we always say, unify, regardless of political or social views. Like, we need to unify as Americans because what was the first thing that people started doing was blaming people for a shitty work ethic and sitting at home collecting unemployment. First of all, why the hell not? Second of all, your government is enticing you to do it. Third of all, the working conditions and the overall benefits and pay and all that stuff, it's not, you can't survive on it. So people are not going back to work in those industries. And the first people to blame are the people themselves instead of the structure and the system.
Exactly. So they want to continue these social programs to increase the social safety net, whatever the fuck they wanted to call it. Mm-hmm. That's what's causing the shortages in the labor market. That's leading to price increases for the average American. That's what people don't like to connect the dots. Let's connect them right here. The government paying people to stay home means restaurants can't hire people, which means their cost of wage increases because they have to pay people more. That leads to your menu item getting more expensive. That's exactly what's happening right now. And they're saying they want to continue these programs for longer, as if they're doing something good. The more they do this, the worse it's going to get. And so now we're having inflation due to supply chain shortages, which is proven. It's everywhere. Everyone knows it. But we're going to have inflation due to wage increases as well, because companies are desperate for employees. So they're increasing their salary. They're going to start paying them more. And then the people that do work got more money in their pocket. That leads to eventually, usually inflating prices because people got more money to buy things.
Exactly. And then everything around you costs more. And then we're right back where we started. Only everyone's bankrupt a little bit quicker.
And then the government has another solution, right? Another brilliant idea.
Exactly.
Oh, it's frustrating. It's
that was good. That's why that's why you watch on YouTube, is for the things that you don't hear, the visual effects on this show.
Yeah. True though. But now, for real, it is frustrating because they're pushing these programs as though it's a good thing, and they're amongst the popular circles right now, which is very popular to be a liberal right now. They're spoken of and thought of as a good thing. So it's almost as though they don't understand they're having a hand in causing a problem. That's not going to be a good thing in the long term. They need to recognize that.
That's the thing, and that's where I think that the lines get a little blurred. Right? Is when you're called a liberal, it's considered bad to a group of people. When you're considered a conservative, you use the term Republican, forget about it nowadays. Like you're completely isolated as a person. It's funny. Caitlyn Jenner is running for governor in California. She did an interview with Tomi Lahren. I saw it last week, and she said to Tomi Lahren, which I actually loved. She's like, it was easier for me to come out as a trans woman than it was to admit that I was a Republican. And I was like, shit, that's probably true nowadays. That's insane.
Definitely in those circles though. I mean,
yeah, no shit.
Rich and famous, you have to be Democrat.
But she made a great point. It's like we're all Americans and we're all pointing the finger at each other, while the puppet master at the top, which is big government, is moving all the pieces. Right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but these social programs, now when we say print money, it's not just literally physically printing money. It's money being represented in the form of tax breaks, right? So the child tax break through COVID that was kept, right? $2,500 a kid. It's $1,250 after the third kid or whatever. Every year, all of that is staying. That was originally a COVID resolution that is now staying because the government needs to have that money circulating in the economy in order to have all of their plans and everything play out the way that they expect them to.
Yeah, and that's the problem again, is they always add new programs. They never take them away. I posted on Twitter last week. When was the last time you heard the government say that this program has run its course, it has served its purpose, and we are shutting it down to save the taxpayers' money? I've never, ever heard that. So they add programs continually and never take away. And that's the problem. That's why we always question it. We always say, is this a good idea? And you can't just praise them for everything they do, because they can promise anything because they more or less control the money supply. Of course, they can promise free lunch. They make the dollars. They're the banker in Monopoly. Like,
Exactly. And they control the system. I think that they've gotten way ahead of themselves, and any type of fixed resolution that is met with any hesitation across the aisle is completely stalled to the point where we can't have anything happen. Now, my example being Juneteenth. Now, very, very, very happy that that is finally a national holiday. It should have been a long, long time ago. Now, that was approved, signed, sealed, and delivered in 2 weeks. Made a law, made a national holiday. Absolutely love it, fully support it. Should have been done a long time ago. Where is the vote on the second or third stimulus package that we were dealing with in like September, October, when everybody was supposed to be getting a check?
oh, right. They couldn't come to agreement on anything, you mean?
Yep,
Yeah.
still locked up. Like still locked up, completely scrapped. Nothing ever happened. Like or voted down, whatever. Like the amount of time that it takes for something that can truly help Americans in need,
Mhm.
instead of trying to get an optic win for themselves.
Yeah, because to clarify,
Now we're taking it very, very seriously. Now that absolutely should have happened. It absolutely should be a holiday. There should have been far, far more done during the days of the BLM movements and everything else, like everything that was happening during the pandemic.
Yep.
100%. But the fact that that was, again, just pushed through with no
2 weeks.
exactly
Yeah.
2 weeks. Like we as a government, if there's a problem, people are struggling, people are dying, people are in need, looking at their government who said they were going to help them the whole time. That's why you pay taxes. That's why you contribute, is because when you're down, we will pick you back up. And I fully support that as well. They're not doing anything for you. And on paper, literally right here on notes, they're taking it from you. They're taking more from you. I think that's
Yeah.
what's so frustrating.
And the Juneteenth thing, I mean, it's kind of frustrating too, because if they cared, they would have done it before June.
I
They
thought it
wouldn't have
was
rushed.
insanely
If they
insulting.
if they genuinely cared, instead of just like it being clear virtue signaling, they would have done it before. They would have been a ramp up to it. It would have been like, we're going to rush and pass this bill before it actually gets here. So
Exactly.
that's some shit. And again, it's the things that would help, they don't do, and the things that isn't going to help, they do. But that's besides the point. Again, anytime they try and step in and control things, it usually goes wrong, right? And it's what we see time and time again. It's they try and take too much control, too much power. Just today, I saw a headline: American Airlines. So here's another example. Government during COVID said we have to spend all this money support the airlines, right?
Mhm.
And we're like, maybe that's not a great idea. Maybe travel, is going to shut down right now. Maybe we can't just keep the airlines afloat forever. This isn't a country where the governments have an ownership stake in the airlines, like in China. They can prop them up. That's okay. In Dubai, they have an ownership stake in the airlines. They own like 50%. Prop them up. It's fine. You have invested interest. In this country, the government doesn't or shouldn't. American Airlines, we paid billions of dollars to keep the airlines afloat. Said you guys can't lay off workers. Promise. Airlines said we promise. Then the stimulus money dried up. They said, hey, sorry guys, we got to lay off workers.
We got to lay everybody off. Yeah.
So we paid the money. Then they laid off the workers anyway. And then they started trying to hire people back. Guess what? Nobody wants to come back to work because of the government programs. They just announced today they have to raise fares and cancel flights for the entire summer because there's too much demand and nobody will come to work. They just announced it today. So
I
like,
hate being here, man.
we spent the money on the front end to keep them afloat and keep them for to not let people go, keep everybody on payroll. Then the money dried up that we spent. They laid everybody off anyway, and now no one's coming back to work. So we're paying those people to stay home. It's lunacy, and that's why
While it all lines maybe 1,000 people's pockets total. Like it all goes to that, like 0.1 or whatever it is percent that's controlling at the top. Again, not conspiracy speaking. It's just more actual factual things that are taking place right in front of our very eyes, and that feeling of there's shit you can do about it continues to grow and grow because nobody's standing up to them. Nobody's, we're not able to do anything.
No one even asks questions. That's the thing, and that's the problem.
That's
We're so incredibly divided that it's the entire argument. Is it your fault or my fault? Is it red or blue? Is it black or white? That no one is like, wait, well, why do we have the problem in the first place? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's such a focus on division and the other side, but there's no focus on the root of anything. And I think that's a big problem. So like spending again, listen, we got to get to renewable energy, right? We're going to run out of fossil fuels eventually. Agreed. We got to make sure we can support the people in the country who are down and out. Agreed. But clearly something has gone off the rails if we can only, as a country, bring in like $3 trillion a year and we need to spend six. We got to close that gap a little bit. That's all. We got to get back to some sort of normalcy. Like maybe the government doesn't ever run a surplus again. Whatever, but like
Yeah.
we got to stop increasing at such a dramatic rate because the amount of debt that we have to issue every year to continue spending more and more is increasing. So that's the problem. It's more debt every year to pay for last year's debt. And at some point, just by a factor of compounding, your interest is going to be more than you could print. You're going to have so much in interest that if you print it, you're going to devalue the dollar. The dollar won't be worth anything because every year we had more and more and more interest. We have to print more and more and more money to pay for it.
Well, I mean, we're getting a little towards the end here, but I do want to say, just leaving it with it, like the United States spends more in defense spending than the next like 18 countries combined. It's like 18 or 19. Now,
Is it really?
yes, it is. In this budget
Thought it was
plan,
10.
there is a 2.7% increase in defense spending. First of all, fucking why? Second of all, fucking how? If we were to cut our defense budget in half, we would rectify 85% of all of the issues that we're talking about right now. And when I say that, I mean education and infrastructure, which are the two biggest things that immediately face this country. Like our roads are shit. Why was there not a I mean, there was, but we made it up. We said it was, and we never actually did it. The money was never there. The money was never used. It was used for something else. It was natural disasters pulled all that money out. Just it all went to which and God bless. That should happen. There should be a reserve for that, but we spend it all somewhere else. That's the thing is we are robbing Peter to pay Paul, but we are both Peter and Paul.
Yeah, no, it's true.
You know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
we need to stop with this idea. And we harp on Democrats. I'm going to jump on Republicans. We need to stop with this bullshit about defending our country and spending all this money and shit. Dude, who's coming to get us right now? Honestly. What are we going to do? That we have the top 19 countries just eliminated.
You know what I didn't know? There's mad countries without aircraft carriers. Like you grew up in the U.S. and there's an aircraft carrier is an extremely common thing. They're just like we got a bunch of them. There's like some major superpowers that don't have like functioning aircraft carriers, as in more than one. Some have one, but like I had no idea.
Shout out to
we spend so much money in defense, mainly because we, kind of patrol the open seas and keep like the world shipping lanes open and safe. But so we foot the bill for that part of our
fully
spending.
Support problem. That, like 100%.
No, it should be a shared world expense, not a U.S. expense.
Now it needs to be. We need to go back to the table and say, hey, listen, we've been carrying the load for a while. We're down and out right now. Even if you cut it by a quarter.
I know. The thing is, there's a lot of programs in place, like we're talking about, that have never been taken out and will never go away. That's why these agreements, these things like the U.S., most people don't know the U.S. like protecting the world shipping lanes, like our agreement to do that more or less for free. It's like part of like a 1970s agreement for the like Bretton Woods deal, like the petrodollar. It's a whole thing, but like, why is that still happening 50 years later? Like, why is nothing ever goes away? Nothing ever changes. Like, they got to update these programs. They got to change them. They got to modify times.
I don't know if you saw if you ever saw the show Veep with the woman who plays Elaine. So
I never got into it, but I love Elaine.
It's dude, it's pretty funny. She's like trying to make a deal or whatever with this guy because it's all private contracts. That's why we spend so much on defense, right? Is because it's all private contracts. It's lining everybody's pockets, all the manufacturers, the people that build, who are also double dipping. You know what I mean? And the shit that we're talking about is portrayed in movies all the time and TV shows. Look at Iron Man, first one, all pissed off when he, is lost in the desert because he finds his own shit. being used by enemies. It's like, how do we double our profits? Oh, duh, sell to both sides. Like, people do that. So why the fuck are we giving them XYZ breaks when they're selling to the other side too? That's a whole nother thing. But basically,
Yes.
she's looking for like $5 million or something like that. And the guy's like, well, we could eliminate this like bunker program from like 1983. It was like a bombing thing, a bombing scare, whatever. And she's like, oh, perfect. And he's like, oh no, it was $50 million. She's like, what? It's like, yeah, $50 million, not 50. And she's like, yeah, great. Let's go ahead and cancel that. And then all the manufacturers came running. He's like, you can't fucking cancel it. Like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's exactly how like it all
I bet it
operates.
is.
It's unbelievable.
Oh man, I bet it does. But yeah, again, you vote and you try and do what you can as a citizen, but it's frustrating because you feel as though no matter what you do, no matter how you vote, no matter how much you yell in a microphone, you feel as though nothing's going to change. I'm happy as our generation. I think we're making progress in a lot of areas.
I also agree with that statement.
I think our mental energy, our choices and our voting power, our buying power, and where we're choosing to spend and place our dollars is going to improve society as a whole moving forward. But there's going to be a lot of repercussions because of that, and I think it's going to take time for that to trickle up into government because it's so old and bureaucratic. But you can see it changing now in the way we buy, where we do our shopping, and you can see the trends. We increasingly spend our money in conscious ways for both us and the environment and those around us. And I think in our lifetimes that will trickle up into government as we age up into government. And I'm hopeful that in our lifetimes we'll see progress on these fronts, but I'm afraid it's going to take a long time.
It is going to take a long time because these people aren't fucking dying. They've been there forever. Like, it blows my mind that like 70% of the Senate was alive during like not Vietnam. Yeah, Vietnam. When was Vietnam?
60s, 70s.
Yeah. So there you go. Like,
yeah.
Literally.
You mean in politics?
Like back then? No. This Senate, I have the notes. I'll do another episode because I broke it down in a presentation because it pissed me off so much. It was something like,
yeah, they're all too old. It's
like 40% is over the retirement age, like over the age of retirement.
Just look at the fact that Biden's leading the country right now. Like, I'm sorry if you love Biden. He's not the most fit person to be leading us as a country. I think that's very abundantly clear by his.
You could have just said he's not a fit person.
It's just true. Like somebody.
No, I agree with you.
But somebody of that age, often, not that there aren't smart, healthy, fit, like 78-year-olds or 73-year-olds, however old Biden is. I'm saying I don't know that is the best option for us to run the country, right?
Both of my grandmothers put her on their house and get tired. There's no way that man could even.
The physical demand.
The physical demand. The
it's going to crush
changes. It's unbelievable. And he's been in politics for so long. It's like, dude.
Yeah, the career politicians is a problem. We're going to have to address that on another episode.
Seriously. Yeah. See, this is what happens. We always keep going. But anyway, the Life Happens podcast or Life Happens pod, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes.
Check us out on Twitter.
And Podbean. Yeah, Twitter's where we're most active. The clips that we get on Instagram, we're trying to get them a little bit shorter, but out of context they sound really bad. So, but we're working on that. And before we sign off, Sean, anything to add?
No. I just want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for everybody who continues to listen. We appreciate you guys, and we really enjoy doing it. So I hope everybody's enjoying and maybe learning something along the way.
Yeah. Until next time, life happens.
Yeah, be good.